Good afternoon. A big welcome to all of you for this launch webinar for the India edition of Ipsos Global Trends 2023. For this session, our aim is to give you the highlights of the emerging story on India, which we are calling Recovery and Reset the India Story. This is just an overview. We are going to be releasing a more detailed India report very shortly. Let me introduce first the speakers for today. I am Pallavi Mathurlal. I am Senior Director, Content and Comms, and I'm kicking off this session. After this, I am going to hand over to Amit Adarkar, who's the CEO for Ipsos India, and he will speak a little more about the backbone of this analysis of Ipsos global trends, and also give you an overview of the trends. And then Krishnelu Datta will take over. He's the practice lead for innovation, market understanding, and consumer advisory. And he will take you through the India story. We will also see a video that is shared by one of our clients, which echoes this recover and reset story of India. And then I will come back and wrap it all up. So let's move to the Ipsos global trends. I thought we should start with a bit of the historical background. We have been running this global survey for a number of years. But it was in 2019 that we started tracking specifically these 12 trends that we are going to be talking about. And how it happened was, there was a large survey. There were 370 questions across 36 markets. And our trends and foresight experts identified 36 global values and 12 trends in 2019. So what happened, these 12 trends, which cover, a large variety of topics like health, brand building, technology, data, role and portrayal of women, and so on. We tracked subsequently how these trends are changing or not changing over time. And so now we come to 2023, which is our latest update. This is based on the latest data that we have collected and a lot of local signals that we've put together, and some thought starter provocations for you and your organization. So now, if you look at it, we have data from 3 stages. We have the pre-COVID data, we have during COVID, we also have an immediately after COVID wave. And this one, which is 2023, is actually looking at post-COVID normalizing. So we hope that you find these insights thought-provoking. Also, just to tell you, this is one of our biggest broadest coverage till now. It covers 50 markets and it covers 87% of the global economy. So across the world, there is a lot of change we are seeing, but also a lot of continuity. Now, many of us are researchers or have some research background, and we want to know how this report was put together. So just to give you a quick look, the process was like this. There was the ideation and the analysis for this whole global report was done by trend and foresight experts, senior quant researchers, and the backbone has been the theory of change, our own Ipsos theory of change, about which we'll tell you in a minute. And this is all to understand whether these changes that we are tracking are happening or not happening. Now, the fieldwork for India was hybrid. So the online fieldwork was run along with all the other 50 countries by our central team, which is Global Advisor. And the India offline fieldwork was handled by the India team, guided by the India researchers to complement and provide a much more representative picture of India. And finally, it has been a massive collaborative effort with local and global Ipsos experts across these 50 countries contributing to analysis and reporting. So with that, I would like to hand over to Amit, who will talk to you about Ipsos's theory of change and about the trends themselves. Over to you, Amit.
Thank you, Pallavi, and thank you for the context setting. So just to recap, we are happy to bring to you possibly the biggest and the most widespread survey that anybody has done. And given that, we have data from 2019, it gives us a good perspective of what happened before COVID, what happened during COVID, what happened immediately after COVID, and now as we get into the recovery and reset period, what's happening to consumer trends. So before we get into the India data, which my colleague Krishnendu is going to present, let me briefly take you through our own theory of change, which has been the guiding principle or the operating model to come up with these trends. Now, when you hear the term trend, there are different ways of defining trends. But to me, what is underlying behind any trend is the notion of change. You notice something today, and maybe that thing sort of goes and becomes bigger, and then you say, okay, this is a trend that I caught maybe right now, but over the years it has become into a mass movement. So you can't really call anything a trend unless there's going to be some change. It could amplify, it could go down, it could disappear, it could suddenly sort of go viral. So if we need to sort of come up and identify trends, we need to start with change, and we need to understand what are the kind of changes which are happening at a global level, at a country level, across demographics. And for that, we need to look at sort of all these changes at multiple levels. And our theory of change, which you see on the screen right now, it sort of looks at three levels. So if you look at on the left, you'll see something called as macro forces. Now, these are obviously forces which operate at a global level. It affects almost all of us. So, for example, changing demographics is one such trend. Now, I think you would have heard that India has become the most populous nation, sort of just a couple of weeks ago. Now, we know that India's replacement rate, fertility rate is now just under the replacement rate. We know that by between 2045 and 2047, Indian population will stabilize and then start degrowing. Now, what is unique about macro forces is that we know to a large extent what will happen on a long-term basis, but it can't really help us on planning our marketing and business strategy for tomorrow because these obviously take a lot of time to materialize. But it's critical to understand the macro process because it gives a good context, because things like changing demographics has a big implication on how you plan business for the longer term. On the right hand side, you'll see what we call as signals. And signals are sort of things that you observe day to day, even today, yesterday, tomorrow. So these are the small behaviors, small changes, which are manifestations of what's happening right now. Now, not all the signals will sort of continue. Some of them will perish, and we tend to call them fads. Some of them will sort of build into a bigger movement. But what is unique about signals is that these are tangible changes that you can sense, feel, and observe. And at the heart of the model is what we call as shifts. And this is essentially, the good old consumer research that we tend to do. We ask people for their perceptions. We ask people for their opinions. So, for example, I can actually sort of, try to get a sense of what is the current consumer sentiment based on the kind of questions I can ask people that you feel comfortable in spending and saving and buying appliances and taking a vacation. Now, shifts are critical because they typically help us in planning and taking a decision over the next 6 months to 1 year. They have a good sort of bearing on the business sentiment. But now I think what makes it powerful is that if you look at shifts in conjunction with signals, which are tangible behaviors as of today, and macro forces, which gives a good sense of what's going to happen over, let's say, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, you essentially get a very holistic picture. So you're looking at, short-term behaviors in conjunction with consumer opinion and in conjunction with the macro forces. And then you have a powerful way of coming up with trends. Now, as the model will tell you, it flows both ways. Sometimes the macro forces results into shifts or opinion changes, and that could lead to behavior. In certain cases, these behavioral changes, which happen day to day, can actually influence shifts and opinions, and that might have a big bearing on some of the bigger, slower macro changes. So our theory of change captures all of these sort of elements, and then the idea is to come up with a holistic understanding of how things will change over the short term, medium term, and long term. Look at attitudes and behaviors, and then identify trends. So based on all of this work which happened across 50 markets, as Pallavi mentioned, we've uncovered a total of 12 trends. And I'll talk about these 12 trends, shortly. So, these are the sort of 12 trends at a glance. Now, obviously, the final report, which Pallavi mentioned, which will be available to all the clients, that report will actually do justice to each of these trends, and we'll talk about how these trends are impacting the Indian population. What are the kind of emerging kind of patterns that we see? Which are the trends which are getting amplified, subdued, which are changing, which are not changing, all of that. So obviously my task is to not get into each and every of the trend. But what I thought is that just to give you a flavor of how these trends pan out, not necessarily at an India level, but just at a conceptual level, Let me just pick up three or four of them and just quickly talk you through what these trends mean. So let me pick up, choices over healthcare, which is one of the trends that we've identified as a part of the 12. Now, this is a very fascinating change because, obviously, as the world comes out of COVID, health has become paramount in everybody's sort of, mind space. But what is unique to this trend is that there's a duality. People believe that the medical profession has really done wonderful work during the pandemic, and there's this renewed faith in doctors and medical specialists. But at the same time, there's a sense that I need to take charge of my health, because at the end of it, I can't sort of rely on only on doctors. There are a lot of things that I can do to prevent diseases, to take care of my mental and physical well-being. So this self-control in deciding what I should do to bring sort of my health at the focus of everything, both mental and physical, that's an interesting element. So this trend is actually interesting because it has a duality of belief in the medical system. At the same time, I need to take charge of what's going to happen. And I think, healthcare is one area which will have a huge impact globally riding on this trend. One of the other trends I want to talk about is this notion of divided world. Now, what is happening is that, over the past few years, and especially during the pandemic, we've had this sort of massive explosion of social media, and because of which we have sort of reached heights of polarization. If you look at some of the political scenarios, the past US elections, some of the European elections, you see this divided population where people either love something, they hate something, they take sides, they're not really open to listening to each other. And a lot of it could be because of overexposure to technology, the fact that we're spending more time with screens than actually talking to human beings. And all of that is leading to this sense of division. I think people are locking themselves into positions. There's a possibility that globalization, that the way we saw in the past, may not happen. So divided world is a very fascinating trend. And the last trend I want to talk about, and this is something which is my personal sort of favorite, is this sense of nostalgia, where people are echoing this sentiment that, I have been sort of exposed to so much of things nowadays. I wish I could go back to the basics. I wish I could go back to how life was maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, or 30 years ago, if you belong to an age cohort, which is my age cohort. And I think some of the reversals that you see now, that vinyls are back with a vengeance, and globally vinyl sales have overtaken the CD sales. Nobody would have thought that a old world fuddy-duddy monologue music storage system will actually overtake the Blu-rays and the audio CDs of the future. But this is just one example of how people are yearning to sort of go back to the sense of nostalgia, and that is bringing back interesting opportunities. Now, each of these trends will have its own manifestations globally, but what we'll do now, and I'll hand over to my colleague Krishnendu for that, is actually look at how is the India data looking and what does it mean in terms of implication for our Indian marketeers. Over to you, Krishnendu.
PD, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Thanks so much, Amit, for taking us all through Ipsos's theory of change and also talking about the global trends at a glance. Thanks, Pallavi, for setting the context about how Ipsos Global Trends is conducted and across the years how it has matured into a very robust mechanism for understanding change, understanding trends across the world. Uh, I'll take over here to talk to you about the India story. Let's take a kind of a journey, through the various regions and the various peoples of India to understand what are some of the summary, what are highlights which are unraveling for India through the lens of the Ipsos global trends. The same trends which Amit just spoke about a moment back, we will look at them for India, and we will take, since we are talking about change, we'll take a step back and see how these trends have kind of evolved over the last couple of years. The arrows on this slide will explain whether some of these trends are stable, increasing, or declining. Now, at a glance, when we think about it for the total urban Indian populace, a lot of the trends that you see on this slide, the 12 trends, seem to be stable. But when we take a closer look at it, we have uncovered a lot of polarization in these trends as well. Now, when I talk about polarization, this is a theme which we will continue throughout the journey that we take you on today. We see that there are interesting groups of trends where this polarization trend is coming through very, very strongly. The first group is really around authenticity, searching for simplicity, and looking back with fondness at a time gone by, which is the appeal of nostalgia. The second group is really around a very different group, which is around data and tech. And the third group really is around a divided world and the way citizens and consumers are reacting to uncertainty and inequality. So, what could be the reason why there is so much of polarization in the trends that we see emerging in India? There is a growing chasm between the top 1% and the rest. We know that there is this growing economic inequality. The top 1% of the Indian population holds 15 times the amount of wealth that the bottom 50% owns. This has resulted in the wealth Gini coefficient for the country also increasing, which points to a wealth disparity. This is also resulting in different cohorts of the population defining this reset and recover post the pandemic quite differently. Now, to bring this polarization and this divide alive, we have looked at the trends and the data in India through the lens of these two cohorts. At the upper end, you have the digital Indians, the ones who are relatively much more affluent, they're digitally savvy, and during the pandemic, they have possibly had a huge increase in their overall digital exposure on various aspects of their life. They are also the citizens who have a much greater exposure to the global world and are much more in sync with possibly what the global citizens think and feel about what's happening in the world. On the other hand, we have the urban masses. This is reflective of the urban mass consumer in India, the overall middle class urban India, if you will. They have possibly been more impacted economically by the pandemic as well. Now, the trends that we go through, and we have tried to identify some themes around these trends, suggest that these two cohorts are divided in working towards what is a common goal of normalizing post the pandemic. So, what are some of these emerging themes for India then? First, we will talk about the divide between. The divide between these two cohorts, which we just discussed and set up for you. Then we will talk about the divide within. So if the first theme is about taking a horizontal view, the second theme is about taking a vertical view within these two cohorts. And then finally, we will end with one theme, which is kind of an unification theme across all of India. We will start with the divide between, and we will spend a little bit of time here because there's a fair bit which is happening around this theme. So, what is happening? So, on the one hand, we have this aspect of slowing down, being real, and seeking for more grounded experiences as you live your life. On the other hand, there is a stepping up with accelerated intent to make up for lost time, time that was possibly lost during the pandemic, opportunities that were possibly lost during the pandemic. So this is the divide that we are going to be bringing alive for you in the next few slides. Within this theme, we first look at the digital Indians. And the key trigger for the way the digital Indians are participating in this theme is the huge amount of digital disruption which happened in their lives during the pandemic. So much so that they're now questioning the value of the sheer pace of technological progress which has hit us. Is it really helping us or is it destroying lives? We see a significant uptrend in this attribute around technological progress destroying lives. The numbers that you see here, the percentages, are strong agreement top box scores on each of these attributes. Please keep that in mind while we take you to some of the other data points bringing alive the trends. Now, if you think back during the pandemic, and we can possibly all relate to it, every aspect of our life, whether it was work, studies, whether it was shopping, whether it was entertainment, whether it was gaming, everything shifted online. Even when you had to consult a doctor, you had to do it through a screen. So we can understand where some of this digital fatigue is coming from. And in turn, the digital Indians are also wishing that they could slow down the pace of their lives. And as a result of these two trends, there is also a growing trend of looking back with fondness at a time gone by where things were slower, when things were simpler. Growing up at a time when my parents were children, a significant uptrend in that particular attribute as well. Now, when we see, Amit explained signals quite beautifully just a few minutes ago. When we see some of the signals around this theme, we can see all around us a lot of brands which are capitalizing on nostalgia and going gadget free. Now, these are brands which are not necessarily talking to the masses, they are talking to the affluent set as well. So we can see some of these themes coming alive in a leading hospitality chain, for example, offering you holiday packages around digital detox. We can see a beloved brand of chocolate, which we possibly all had while growing up, bringing in the theme of nostalgia into their communications and borrowing into tapping into one of the advertisements which we all remember very fondly while growing up. What could be some of the implications, therefore, for the digital when we are talking to digital Indians around this theme? What about tapping into authenticity through origins and destinations? Or, like Amit spoke about vinyls, nostalgia themed products and experiences. There could be Polaroid cameras also. Traveling for experiences, traveling packages, holiday packages, which are rooted in experience, which are rooted in authenticity. Now, we will come to another aspect of this theme, and we are still with digital Indians here. Living life the way it used to be. Again, a lot of nostalgia being expressed here. And if we link this to the everyday, what does it link to? It links to the overall theme of authenticity. And it brings alive the complexity of possibly shopping on a screen, which has entered our lives in a very, very big way during the pandemic. And the complexities of the online shopping being more difficult is again making the digital Indians yearn for authentic experiences of possibly shopping in a brick and mortar environment, in a traditional environment, where you could make an entire event with your family out of the shopping experience, where you could talk to the shopkeeper, where you could bargain and haggle. That entire thing is coming back, as a nostalgia express theme. The authenticity theme is also expressing itself in digital Indians willing to spend more on brands rooted in authenticity. We see a significant uptrend in that attribute as well, along with the uptrend on the shopping attribute, where an incline for shopping offline is being expressed by this cohort. When we see signals around this particular aspect, we see a lot of physical events, large crowds, musical events, etc., coming to us and being extremely successful and enjoying huge amount of participation as well. We are seeing a lot of these government guidelines to tackle fake reviews on e-commerce sites, for example. Brands and customers love online shopping, but offline stores haven't lost their edge. Offline stores are coming back in a big way. In a lot of the work that we do around shopping in Ipsos India suggests this as well, where the sheer joy and simplicity of offline shopping is driving people back to modern retail and even the traditional stores. What could be some of the implications? Experience zones within modern retail, human touch points across the customer journey, even if it is digital, through maybe voice or even video, and associations with unique and real experiences. Now, we will now move to the other cohort and see how this entire theme is manifesting within them. When we move to the other cohort, we see a significant concern about wealth disparity creeping in. Now, we know that this cohort possibly has been impacted much more economically during the pandemic, loss of opportunities to work, income, and so on and so forth. There is a very significant agreement with the world changing too fast. So, is this cohort therefore feeling the pangs of being left behind? We can see some very significant signals how the rich, the affluents have actually got even richer during the pandemic. And the K curve of recovery, which we have all heard about, which impacts negatively the lower edge of the population. Does it impact the recovery of the great consumption story? However, we also know that this particular consumer cohort is resilient, and there is their expression of the need to catch up, to come back with a bang. So, so what is that? What is that being driven by? We see a very significant endorsement of ambition through achieving prominent career positions. We see significant endorsements in globalization, global opportunities to go abroad and work to make money, seeing significant endorsement. We are seeing significant endorsement of trust in business leaders. They're looking up to the business leaders to allow them to, etch these paths for them to take and come back, bounce back, catch up. And on this journey, they are looking at technology as an enabler. Now, this is a significant difference from the other cohort who we just crossed by. And this particular cohort, the urban masses, are actually saying that data privacy is probably not so much of a concern. Some amount of it is likely to happen. Some amount of loss of data privacy is likely to happen. And tech progress destroying lives is a downward trend among this cohort. So they are looking at tech as an enabler as they look to come back and catch up on all the opportunities that they may have lost for some time in between. Signals that we see in this particular theme, there is a lot of signals which point out this emerging divergence between the luxury and the mass segment, wherein the top end was shining while the inflationary burden on the bottom end was kind of playing havoc with the mass market demand. We also we also saw this pattern of embracing global opportunities, where almost close to 3 million Indians went abroad for work in the past 2.5 years. And we've seen certain industries show a tremendous bounce back after the pandemic as well. Again, linking to the theme that this particular cohort is now looking to come back, looking to do things which impact their everyday, improve their everyday, and embrace all the opportunities that will allow them to do so. Some implications. Tech is going to continue to drive the next millions growth, their consumption, and so on. This cohort is possibly likely to seek out new icons, new aspirations, away from the cricketers and the movie celebrities, the startup heads, and those are the people, the youngsters who are below 30, below 40, new icons in the world of business could become new aspirational role models. Communicating value to this cohort is likely to continue to remain important because they are likely to keep seeking value in everything that they participate in. Access to lower town classes and giving access through e-commerce to the lower town classes while ensuring value could likely to be extremely important as well. Now, we will look at the second theme, which is the divide within. In this theme, we are looking at individual expressionism and opinions about society. And we see some very interesting differences and nuances in this particular arena as well. We'll start off with the urban masses in this theme. And the first thing that we see is that for this particular cohort, gender roles are possibly again getting defined more traditionally in a more hardened sort of a way. And we see a significant upshift in this particular attribute of the role of the women to be good mothers and wives rather than breadwinners. Now, interestingly, while this is the opinion expressed about what's happening with their own family and inside their own homes, when they talk about what's expressionism outside the home, they project and they express a fairly liberal mindset. And they talk with strong agreement about individual freedom and even LGBTQ communities to be living as they please. So there is a clear divide for the urban masses when it comes to this theme about what is happening inside the home and what they think about the world outside the home. The divide runs in a completely different direction for digital Indians. There is more liberal acceptance of women as breadwinners when it comes to this cohort, and this is something which we can probably expect and anticipate. However, there is a hardening of stance towards LGBTQ, and there is a drop in this particular attribute about LGBTQ to live as they please. Now, why is this happening? It is happening possibly with this intense social media exposure, a lot of opinions being expressed in media. The need for political correctness is possibly hardening the stance towards LGBTQ. We have interestingly seen this theme coming alive, this trend coming alive, even in some of the more developed nations in the West. And there too, it is happening among the more affluent, the more digitally savvy cohorts. So this is a nascent trend. We'll have to watch how this comes out, how this plays out in some of the future Ipsos global trends in India. The signals in this particular theme are abundant around us. LGBTQ is gaining acceptance, but it is still full of challenges. And we have seen a lot of signals about how women and their roles are possibly regressing with the pandemic, hurting this particular aspect a lot. So when we think about implications in this particular domain, when we think about communications for our brands, we possibly need to show sensitivity and yet be balanced in what we are portraying, in the role models who are talking our brands, and so on and so forth. There is also an implication about building equity in the workplace, which will possibly make it easier for employees to empathize with their employers. Now, having looked at the two themes which talk about the divides across and the divides within, we finally come to a trend which is a great unifier. And Amit briefly touched upon this particular trend when he was talking about the Ipsos global trends more holistically. And this is a particular trend which in India, for both the cohorts, have remained high and stable across the last 2 years. And this is the trend of health, health management, health consciousness, and so on and so forth, is remained high and stable across both. How does it manifest itself? We see that there is a need to look after oneself, to be conscientious about both physical health and mental health, to take control of physical health and mental health. Mental health is coming up as an increasing trend which people are talking about across the world, and Indians are not left behind either. There is also this aspect about control. So while there is a lot of faith which is building up in medical systems, institutions, healthcare practitioners, vaccines, and so on and so forth, there is this need to be in control over healthcare decisions which impact the self and the family. There are a multitude of signals around this theme, which we all see almost every day around us. The cult of biohacking, focus on preventive healthcare, which has seen a significant uptick ever since the pandemic. You do not want to wait to fall ill, right? You want to preempt that, and you want to not fall ill. You want to ensure that you don't fall ill so that you do not lose productive hours in your life, or hours which you can spend maybe being happy and healthy with your family. The dietary supplements market has seen a huge upsurge in India as well. What could be some of the implications? So any products in the OTC domain possibly which support this particular theme of taking control, of taking charge of one's health is going to keep seeing a lot of growth. And this is going to happen at both the mass end and at the premium end. Mental wellness, specific interest and attention over here, apps, support for mental wellness online, maybe products which support mental wellness are going to likely to keep seeing a sharp increase. And similarly, moving away from consumers, when we think about employees, workplace initiatives which support mental wellness for employees are likely to put employers in a positive position with employees. I now have the great pleasure of playing for you a video which a long-term client of ours, Mr. Shubhadeep Banerjee, whom we have been working with for a very long time, is going to express his thoughts about how some of these trends, some of these themes that we just spoke about, he's seen some of that even in the businesses which he's closely involved in. He's
Hi everyone. This entire thing of illusion, there's a big illusion that India is one. India is a diverse and disparate nation. Given this context, ITC looks at India as multi-India. So the top end of India is what we call as India Alpha, which is roughly around 1.8% or 2% of India, accounting for 2 crore plus population. That's on one side of the spectrum, and then comes the larger India 1, and the belly of India, which is India 2 and India 3, accounts for roughly around 33%. And to top that, what we also observe amongst the India 1, that there's a significant increase in the importance of values like authenticity, transparency, purpose. And I'll call out a few things. For example, Ashirvad Swasti Milk created something like a report card. And as consumers, you can scan a code, see the quality standards of the specific batch of milk that you're buying, or the organic part of ITC's portfolio. You can scan that and trace back that bag of wheat or atta right till the farm, right? Purpose, and we have been talking about purpose, brands have been talking about purpose for some time. The important part is how do you integrate this idea of purpose with consumers and with the brand world, right? For example, Ashirvad today talks about Char Kadam Aage. Now, how do we skill up the women of India? How do we also create avenues for them to go ahead and utilize this skilling in earning a few, as well as earning and contributing for achieving certain goals and dreams that they have? So, taking the brand worlds, integrating the world of purpose is becoming increasingly important. There has been a significant increase in outdoor activities, and this is an outcome as we have come out of COVID. The need to connect with the real world, the need to connect with the real self, the need to connect with people has become increasingly important. And we see the reflection of that in the business of ITC in hotels, in its restaurants, in a multitude of cloud kitchen that ITC has launched, especially now in Bangalore, for example. COVID has also created some very long-term shifts in consumer behavior. Of course, the expected answer is around health, but beyond that, with twists in products, the need for creating new ideas around fusion, um, the increasing in the spike in the product, they've become a really interesting set of codes that we're observing in the industry. Inflation, which was the story last year, created a dent amongst India, but not much expectedly around India Alpha. But what has become important is the key imperative to convince them on the value benefit. The definition, the narrative around value has become very, very important. Given this cautious mindset with which consumers are approaching or have approached for some time now, superior quality has become table stakes. So let's say as brands, as we thrive to push premiumization as a vector, we definitely need to now talk beyond quality. New and exciting range, accessible pack sizes, right promotion offers for trial generation, they've all become increasingly important. E-commerce have been growing rapidly. Grocery is still an evolved idea, is also growing. Quick commerce is building on it. Tier 2, tier 3 cities adopting e-commerce grocery. These are all going to keep growing in our eyes. With that, I think there are too many dynamics, very disparate, coexisting, and that's making the life of marketeers really challenging and interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Shubhadeep, for sharing your thoughts. Find a lot of commonalities in sync between the way the themes are playing out, in the India story that we just saw. I will now hand it back to Pallavi to talk about what's next.
Thank you so much, Krishnendu. And that was a great, hearing Shubhadeep speak. I will just quickly wrap up by telling everyone on the call about what's next. We have been talking about the Full India report, which is a detailed deep dive into all the 12 trends, and that will be available really soon by the end of the week. We will put it up on our website, and we will also share the link with all of you to download. Of course, if you have any information that you need, these are the people to contact. And lastly, of course, if once you've read the report and you want to know how to apply this to your category or your sector, we are here to help. You can contact your Ipsos team or the people listed here. And that brings us to the end of the webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. And I hope you found it thought-provoking. Look out for the Full India report. It's a bye from all of us now.